It is October 14th, 2024. 22 days remain until the American people will go to the polls by the tens of millions and choose between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. One of those two will become the 47th president of the United States. They will hold the most powerful office in the world. This is the warning. Donald Trump pulled down the veil this weekend. Donald Trump revealed exactly who he is, and there's no going back from it. Let's understand something. What Donald Trump is saying has been said before. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But before I do, I want to make clear that we live in a time of hyperbole and exaggeration. I've been accused of it, I think unfairly, because what I've talked about for 10 years, I've done my best to talk about with precision as a warning about what was coming around who Donald Trump is and what his movement is and what it's become and can still become. It is dangerous. It is un-American. We stand at an hour that has been prophesied by people skeptical about the future. America has arrived at its most dangerous authoritarian moment across its entire vast 248-year history. There have been moments before when Charles Lindbergh revealed himself in 1940 in a speech in Des Moines, where he blamed the coming Second World War on the Jews. Mostly, his speech was greeted with revulsion. And one of the reasons why was Franklin Delano Roosevelt was sitting in the Oval Office and understood the moral catastrophe which Lindbergh represented, that fascism represented. And thus, he was able to communicate about it, able to warn about it, able to be clear with the American people who were slow to awaken to the dangers of it, about what was coming, about the threat at hand. In the end, the American people paid a terrible price to stop fascism. But in the end, at the end of that war, the United States was left as the most powerful nation in world history. And it authored a period, an era, an epoch of history that historians called the American century, that climaxed in the triumph of liberal free market capitalism and democracy over totalitarianism against communism, with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union. A lot of people in that moment said history was at its end, that we had arrived at an enlightened summit from which there would be no slide back ever, that it wasn't possible, that liberal values were ascendant, that the primacy of the ideas of freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience would never again be challenged. When the Nazis came to power, they came to power attacking immigrants, attacking Jews, Untermenschen, lesser people, the ones with bad genes, impure blood. You see, it was the Aryans who stood atop of a racial hierarchy. The Jews were at the bottom. Donald Trump has put other groups at the bottom. But the point of any racial hierarchy is that there are always people at the bottom, the most impure of the impure. And those human beings always face the greatest danger from this ideology. The under people, the subhuman people who were encroaching on the living space of the pure people were rife with disease. They were filthy. They were degenerate. They were impure. And in the end, they were called animals and they were exterminated like animals. But the people who did it, when they ran for election, ran talking about preserving freedom. They ran talking about cutting inflation, about building highways and creating jobs and restoring dignity and pride to the wounded ego of a nation. And about 30% of the country got in line behind the movement, which yielded it 100% political power. And everything they did under the law. Their law, perverse though it may be. But the Nazis were assiduous about making sure that everything they did, from the stripping of the Jewish citizens' right to an existence in Germany, was done under a legal framework. All of it. The enemy within is the language of a Nazi. When people talk about needing to deploy the military against an unnamed enemy, when they speculate about the necessity of the use of force to stamp out bad thoughts, bad ideas, that all have within them a common thread, which is that the bad idea, always a sign of mental illness, sickness, derangement, criminality, has to do with opposing as a matter of conscience the idea that Donald Trump should be free to take as he wishes, including your freedom, your liberty, your rights. We have come to a profound moral moment in the United States of America. A vile and terrible man has arisen at the head of a movement. He has a talent for demagoguery. He has a rare charisma that provokes insanity and instability. He gives license to a terrible grievance, turning it into a nobility. He has created a community of malice, bound together by the lie that somehow they are superior, that there's somebody beneath them and there's somebody hunting them that they have to get first. This is the world of the theys and the thems, where always there is a conspiracy at hand, the invisible enemy at your throat, and only Donald Trump able to protect you. It's nonsense. It's a lie. Listen to what Trump is saying. Listen to this. It's not new.
And they're bringing drugs, and they're bringing crime, and they're rapists. These people are the most violent people on earth. And remember, they don't come just from South America. They come from the Congo and Africa. They come from all over the world. They come from the Middle East. They come from Asia. They come from prisons and jails. They come from all over the world. And she was saying, these are very nice people. Either she's really dumb or she's very naive.
Listen to these words.
We have the greatest military in the world, but you have to know how to use them. You have to know how to use them. But I protect you against outside enemies. But you know, I always say, we have the outside enemy, so you can say China, you can say Russia, you can say Kim Jong-un, you can say, but that's not, it's going to be fun. If you have a smart president, no problem. It's the enemy from within, all the scum that we have to deal with that hate our country. That's a bigger enemy than China and Russia.
Listen to these words.
We will not be conquered. We will not be occupied. We will not be invaded. We will reclaim our sovereignty. We will reclaim our nation, and I will give back your freedom and give back your life.
Kamala Harris must confront this with much tougher, much straighter, much clearer language than she has done. This is her test, this moment at hand. It is the audition. How is it that a president, a great one, a Lincoln, would respond to a man like Trump? What would FDR say? What would John Kennedy say? Kamala Harris should imagine that and then say, it's time for her to take command. An existential moment has arrived, and the test is for Kamala Harris. The threat could not be clearer. The evil that Donald Trump is espousing must be called out clearly, directly, by its name. If Kamala Harris doesn't do it, then she will fall short. She will not have passed the test. She will have come far on the journey and will have much to be proud of personally, but it will have failed. The effort to save America from this man who refused to yield when he lost an election, incited a coup, and was allowed through apathy and indifference and selfishness to make a comeback. His campaign deserves confrontation. He is spiraling, decaying, and his words of malice are becoming clearer with the decay. that's wisping away the cover of who Trump has always been, a fascist. This is not somebody who believes in the ideas and the ideals of America. A grave moment filled with danger has arrived. Freedom is threatened. Nobody ever in history has ever promised to do the things that Trump is promising to do, who, upon taking power, didn't do them. He is surrounded by a bevy of hustlers and criminals, religious fanatics, political extremists, and wannabe oligarchs who want a license to steal, to take. And what Trump wants is obedience. So long as you stay in line, you'll be okay. But that's not the American way. The United States is a country full of free people. And the idea that Donald Trump will use the United States Army to crush dissent, to oppose freedom of speech, to impose a freedom of faith by stripping it away, this is all insanity. We have a chance to stop it cold. We should take it as a country, because should Donald Trump come to power, a terrible crisis will begin. And during that crisis, there are things that will happen in America that no one will believe could have ever happened, except for the people that were smart enough to listen to Donald Trump. Because in the end, there's nothing that he can do that he hasn't already promised that he's going to do. He's made it perfectly clear. The choice is clear. This threat must be stopped. It must be opposed. Across the centuries and the generations, Americans have sacrificed everything to preserve a way of life and to expand it to include all people of all races, all faiths. This idea that human beings should be free, that they're born free, that the purpose of life is the pursuit of happiness. These American ideals and ideas are worth preserving, and they are under grave threat from this man. Listen to his malice. It's a threat aimed at your children. We have to stop it. If we don't, a terrible bill will come due. Mark my words. This is The Warning. I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning, and I invite you to subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.